If you tried to get a television repaired today, you'd probably struggle to find someone willing to do it. TV repair shops, once common in nearly every town, have almost completely disappeared. The reason isn't mysterious. Televisions became cheap enough that replacing them made more economic sense than fixing them. But that wasn't always true. For most of the 20th century, repairing a television wasn't optional. It was expected. A television was one of the most expensive items in the house. When it failed, you didn't throw it away. You called the repair shop. This is how that system worked, why it made economic sense for decades, and why it ultimately collapsed. When the picture started rolling, when the sound faded, or when the screen went dark entirely, you didn't assume the set was finished. You assumed something inside it had failed, and that meant it could be fixed. Sometimes the repairman came to your house. He arrived with a metal toolbox and a case of vacuum tubes. He removed the back panel of the cabinet and exposed the chassis, rows of glass tubes, wires, capacitors, and transformers. Televisions built between the 1940s and early 1980s were modular machines. They were designed around components that could be removed and replaced individually. Vacuum tubes burned out, capacitors failed, resistors drifted. But most of those parts were accessible. If a tube failed, you pulled it out and put a new one in. Repair shops stocked common tubes. Drugstores often had self-service tube testers near the entrance. You could walk in with a paper bag full of tubes, test them one by one, and buy replacements from a cabinet below the machine. The entire repair economy rested on two facts. Televisions were expensive, and they were built to be serviced. In the 1960s and 1970s, a color television could cost $400 to $600. Adjusted for inflation, that's several $1,000s today. For many families, it was one of the most expensive purchases in the home, second only to major appliances. Replacing it casually wasn't an option. Paying $20 or $40 for a repair made sense. The repair shop itself was usually small. A storefront tucked between a barber shop and a hardware store, a counter in front, a workbench in the back covered in open sets, shelves stacked with RCA, Zenith, Motorola boxes, service manuals, often Sam's PhotoFact folders, lined up in binders. It was a skilled trade, but not an obscure one. There were vocational programs in electronics. There were parts suppliers and wholesalers. Manufacturers published schematics so technicians could trace circuits and diagnose faults. In many towns, the TV repairman made steady money. He ran service calls during the day and bench repairs in the shop. The work was predictable because the failure points were predictable. Vacuum tubes generated heat. Heat caused wear. Wear caused failure. It was mechanical, understandable, fixable. That system began to strain in the 1970s. The first shift was technological. Vacuum tubes gave way to transistors. Transistors gave way to integrated circuits. Solid-state televisions ran cooler and failed less often. But when they did fail, the problem was no longer a single plug-in component. Circuit boards became denser. Components were soldered directly in place. Diagnosis required new tools and deeper knowledge. The second shift was economic, and it mattered more. By the 1980s and 1990s, television manufacturing had moved overseas. Assembly became automated. Entire circuit boards were produced at scale for a fraction of previous costs. Prices fell. A television that might have cost a month's wages in 1970 could be replaced for a few $100s by the mid-1990s. By the early 2000s, large flat-screen televisions were selling for under $200. At that point, the economics broke. If a service call cost $75 and the repair cost another $100, you were close to the price of a brand new set, and the new set was thinner, lighter, brighter, and came with a warranty. Consumers made rational decisions. They replaced instead of repaired. Repair shops didn't close all at once. They thinned out. Fewer calls. More customers saying, "It's probably not worth fixing." Technicians adapted where they could. They repaired VCRs, microwaves, stereo equipment. But those devices followed the same economic trajectory. Cheaper manufacturing, lower replacement cost, higher relative labor cost. The core issue wasn't that the skill disappeared. It was that labor became more expensive than production. Once the cost of skilled time exceeded the cost of mass manufacturing, the repair model stopped scaling. By the late 1990s, many long-standing shops were gone. The service vans were sold. The tube testers ended up in antique stores. What disappeared wasn't just a job. It was an entire infrastructure, a network of local expertise built around the assumption that durable goods would be maintained. For most of the 20th century, if something broke, you fixed it, not because it was sentimental, because it was financially rational. That assumption flipped over a few decades. As electronics became cheaper and more disposable, replacement became the default response. Televisions became sealed units. Plastic housings replaced wood cabinets. Circuit boards replaced modular components. Manufacturers no longer designed sets with repair in mind. They designed them for cost efficiency and scale. The shift made technology more accessible. More households could afford multiple televisions. Features improved rapidly. Picture quality increased. Screen sizes expanded. But something subtle changed in the relationship between people and the objects they owned. When something costs a substantial portion of your income, you maintain it. You save the paperwork. You protect it. You repair it. When something costs a small fraction of your income, you replace it. That shift wasn't emotional. It was structural. At its peak, the television repair trade supported tens of thousands of technicians across the United States. By the early 2000s, it had largely collapsed. Today, repair still exists, but mostly in niche areas. Vintage restoration, high-end specialty electronics, independent hobbyists. The neighborhood TV repairman who made house calls with a toolbox and tube caddy is mostly gone. Was it inevitable? Probably. When labor costs rise and manufacturing costs fall, repair declines. That's the pattern not just for televisions, but for many consumer goods. The television repair shop didn't disappear because the work wasn't valuable. It disappeared because the economics no longer justified it. What we gained was convenience, lower prices, better technology. What we lost was a system built around durability and local expertise. For decades, the idea that you would repair a television rather than replace it was ordinary. Today, for most people, the opposite feels ordinary. So I'm curious, did your town have a TV repair shop? What was it called? Did the repairman make house calls? Did you ever test tubes at the drugstore? What brand was your first color television? Zenith, RCA, Magnavox? Do you remember what it cost? Leave it in the comments. Because while the neighborhood TV repairman may be gone, the people who remember that world are still here.